So Aggretsuko's 5th and final season just released on Netflix, and I have a lot of mixed feelings on it. This video will have spoilers about what happens in season 5 of Aggretsuko and the complete show, so consider this your warning if you don't want to be spoiled. If you want to know the TLDR of the events of the season, but don't feel like watching through it, I'd love to tell you all about it. Aggretsuko is somewhat notorious for having disappointing or deflated endings to their seasons, where it feels like the progress is deliberately halted, especially when discussing the romance of Retsuko and Haida. The time in between seasons of Aggretsuko feels like some Super Mario Bros. Lost levels. Like, I did a rewatch of the first 4 seasons this week leading up to season 5, so I already knew everything that happens, but it still surprises me how so many bigger moments occur off screen / in between seasons. Like, the end of season 1 is Haida confessing his love to Retsuko in the hospital, but season 2 starts as if nothing happened and they're just friends still. So I watch and say, did they just soft reboot season 1? Or pretend this didn't happen? This could be on me, but I didn't know she rejected him then until season 3 when they recall the hospital scene. Yes, the context leads me to assume that's what happened, but isn't it weird to not have a bigger moment like that on screen? Furthermore, season 5 starts with everyone in the office asking Retsuko how Haida's doing, which reveals to us that Haida left the company, which makes sense since he suplexed the new CEO out the window, but I guess it didn't really hit me that Retsuko and Haida are dating now, even though I guess they did go on dates in season 4. It was a little hard for me to gauge how serious or official this was. Even this season, every couple episodes, I almost had to remind myself they are indeed dating, because they act kinda as they always did. It's not really more romantic or intimate now. Haida moves in with Retsuko, and I think he sleeps on the couch. I think the closest he's slept to a woman in this season is the purple skunk gamer girl, but we'll get into that. So I think it's best we start at the beginning of the season and work our way through together. So we see Haida is unemployed, and he's really gotten into this Final Fantasy XIV looking gacha game that he's been spending a lot of money on, gambling rolls for good weapons and stuff. Haida's been playing this game with his new online friend consistently, and it turns out she's a gamer with a really cool design. She kinda reminds me of Marnie from Pokemon, personality-wise too. She's got the goth aesthetic deadpan personality, but almost surprisingly kind despite this. An awful thing my friend pointed out. Not only is she a purple skunk, but she's a very close shade of purple to Melissa from Mike and Melissa. So leave a comment if you remember Mike and Melissa. And I formally apologize if I've ruined this character for you by sharing this information. I'll take the full blame for that. Haida gets kicked out of his apartment because his family that owns the complex is selling it. I don't know why, but they do a good job showing Haida's tension with his family. And this stern professional character we meet turns out to be Haida's successful younger brother, Jiro. Not having much money saved up because he's unemployed and spent a lot of money on this online game, Haida ends up sleeping in an internet cafe, and this just looks so uncomfortable and terrible. And they do a great job showing how brutal this is, trying to sleep in a chair every night. Haida's MMO friend reaches out, and when Haida reveals he can't play because he's sleeping in an internet cafe, it turns out they're actually in the same one. She has her own space, and it's actually bigger than Haida's, where he can actually lay down and sleep. And I think the highlight of the season for me is right when he lays down, he opens his eyes and sees Retsuko like a Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare, glaring at him. I'm really glad they made this scene funny and angry, and not a sad, dramatic moment, over the misunderstanding that we would have spent a whole episode backtracking on and clearing up. Like, if they treated this how they did Haida and Inui when she realized Retsuko was over just before she got there, I would have been really annoyed. Like, this is the last season, we gotta keep moving. So when Retsuko realizes Haida's been doing this harsh physical labor and sleeping in an internet cafe, they decide for Haida to move in with Retsuko at her place. Retsuko's nosy mother shows up and pretends she didn't see Retsuko living with her boyfriend without even informing their family, and tells them to come over in a couple weekends. They're disappointed that Haida's unemployed and that their daughter is taking care of Haida, but I don't know, I admire his honesty in this scene. It's nice for him to say, hey, I don't have a job anymore, but I'm working hard, and we'll make things work, instead of lying to them that he still works with her and they have nothing to worry about. There's a funny moment where the dad takes a picture of the three of them on the couch, and he zooms in so Haida's not in the photo. Like, that shit hurts, but it's funny. The comedy in this season is a lot of funny jabs like this. Later, we meet Haida's family, and we see they live in a huge traditional estate. It's really cool to see where Haida grew up, as we've always known him to be punk rock from his aesthetic, his guitars, even his music, the 1 or 2 times he sings in Aggretsuko. His family basically says, hey, don't be a loser, it'll hurt the family's campaign for next election, and we see the tension with his family end really awkwardly. The father is concerned about the word getting out his son was caught sleeping in an internet cafe and was essentially homeless, but Haida assures he wouldn't go around proclaiming he's part of this powerful family, and he staunchly defends the people who do go or live there, as a lot of them are people who've fallen on hard times, but they've really helped Haida and treated him with care. When I heard the dad talk about his concerns of people finding out the poor living conditions of his son, I thought to myself, oh my god, the purple skunk's a political terrorist, or she's been stalking Haida, even going as far as playing this MMO with him so she could pick up dirt on him for an opposing election. But no. Nothing like this happens. She kinda takes a back seat for the rest of the season, but I think that would have been really cool. People would have thought that was cool, right? I guess she's not too good to be true. So this is where the season takes a bit of a nosedive for me. A politician reaches out to Aggretsuko, and he's a member of the House of Representatives, like Haida's father. And he also represents the Party of Rage, which I guess is this declining, rebellious party. He asks her to run for office for the Party of Rage, as he's the only one left, and together they can help rebuild the voice of the people, but it's just too vague for me to care about its impact. I can't tell you what it represents really, but I guess it symbolizes the frustration of the common people, which Aggretsuko represents in a lot of ways as a disgruntled office worker. So he wants to get Aggretsuko to run for office too. It's kinda like if Bernie Sanders sponsored the whatever you say, boomer girl to run for council with him, I guess. Aggretsuko's inspired to run for office because her former idols kidnap her. I don't know, it's hard for me to justify why she cares about this. Like, she says in every episode of the second half of the season she doesn't want to run for office, and all she wants is a nice quiet life with Haida. The idols bring her back to the underground idol stage she performed on with them during season 3, and she performs for the crowd, but like, I don't feel anything from this because they acknowledge she's a people pleaser and just needs a push in the right direction to do what they want. They say she probably enjoys it deep down, but it doesn't give me any sense of enjoyment. Like when she rages at her boss, Mr. Tone, in season 1, you know it's fully of her volition, and there's a big reason behind her rage. How these political aspects align with Aggretsuko's overarching plot is hard for me to understand. They discuss the crashing of Japan's bubble economy in the 90s, which I think is really interesting, and they talk about Japan being a really old country with like a third of the population over 65, and how politics could use someone young because the older candidates keep blowing off the younger folks. But without any specific examples of how the young people are being blown off, I kinda just have to take their word for it and don't really care as much. If Aggretsuko had more motivation to run for office because the current politics are what are causing her to be so dissatisfied with her job, it makes more sense for her to run. And the more I think about it, it could totally be implied that the harsh Japanese corporate culture is a result of the crash bubble economy along with the older politicians in office, but I don't get this feeling of connection in the show. They're motivated to use Aggretsuko's voice to reach the people, and she'll help create a unified core of the younger citizens of Japan. So although I don't totally feel the spirit and reasoning behind her running, there's a great sense of scale to what she seeks to accomplish, totally fitting for a grand finale. This show used to be about how Aggretsuko hates her job and had a ton of bottled up rage about it, but her political campaign doesn't have much to do with this character in show-defining aspect, and I don't get any vibe that the local politics are what caused any of her frustration, and it's a shame, because there's so much she could be angry about. She could discuss the socio-political aspects of Japanese corporate culture, like being overworked or underpaid. Like, you might be familiar with the term karoshi when Japanese workers die from overexhaustion, which is common enough to even have its own term. But when she's campaigning, what she sings about is how her soy sauce packet won't open, or how her coworkers annoy her. She kinda mentions the nepotism Jiro has, being the son of the previous representative, but it's not really a focal point of hers. She talks about how the future looks bleak in her final song, but I don't know, the songs don't really get specific enough for me to care about them too much, regardless of how much dread I may have. The rest of the season is Aggretsuko campaigning and stuff, and there's some really sweet moments, like Gori and Washimi give Retsuko the money that she's desperately tried to raise to run for office, and they say they're richer for meeting her, which is so sweet. Tadano also buys the internet cafe Haida was in because he loves its efficient dimensions, and he helps Retsuko by making it her campaign headquarters, and it's nice to see him, but I wish we saw more of him. He's my favorite character of this show. I thought it would have been cool if we saw Tadano's AI more this season. I guess if this season came out a year or two later, we might, but with the exponential growth and incorporation of AI in work settings like self-checkout for example, or even its increasing use and controversy in AI art, it would be interesting to see it mentioned here again, since Tadano's motive is to create less work and hassle for people through AI. Also, this show was built on the foundation of work and corporate life. They could have created a big contrast, like the cold AI business versus the indomitable human spirit working, or something like that, I don't know. Mr. Tone doesn't use his abacus anymore, he's learned how to use a computer. I truly feel old now. Retsuko runs for office in a small sector of Japan that's historically belonged to Haida's family due to its small size and Haida's father having massive appeal in this ward due to his traditional old-time values, as suggested by the fact he's always bringing up how this country pulled itself up by its bootstraps after the war. And it makes sense when you remember they said a third of the population of Japan is over 65, so of course they would vote for someone that appeals to this, even if he detests the younger generation. Although Retsuko's rage singing feels pretty forced this season, the closest she gets to actually having rage is at the end of the show when she gets cold feet to perform in her last campaign message. But we see Mr. Tone, who's historically angered her, deliberately rile her up to motivate her one last time. It's a sweet touch, and it's always conveyed through the show he cares for her, but with tough love, even acknowledging that he did indeed remember she screamed at him and defeated him in battle in the first season. But he's always pretended to not remember, claiming he drank too much. The final performance is kind of the same as anything else. Nothing really significant is said, but it's cool to see the idol girls performing with her and seeing all her friends watching. It's a nice conclusion to see all the friends we've made over 5 seasons all be there for her and what she means to all of them, though I personally wish they used all their special skills in this conclusion a little more. Like, it would have been cool if Feneko dug up dirt on social media for their opposition in this election, since she's shown she has an amazing talent for sleuthing on social media, tracking people's coordinates through the reflection of a drinking glass on a table, for instance. One of the funnier moments of the whole season is we see Feneko join the online MMO Haida's obsessed with to spy on him, and her character is this giant tank that we see her ears poking out of. It's such a funny visual. Also, this shot goes hard, I don't care what anyone says. It could have been cool to see Kabai do more espionage work in this campaign, or Sonoda using her special corporate skill of sucking up to her superiors, like maybe she even sucks up to Jiro for part of their political operations. I would have personally loved the incorporation of all the friends we made along the way. The last thing I want to quickly mention about this final performance is Jiro yells at his father, who's barking at him to keep fighting and to not lose to Retsuko, and he even proclaims he'll fight to ensure politicians retire at 65 moving forward. Haida and their father laugh at Jiro, and it's kind of a nice moment. Like, the family is almost bonding in a way over this out-of-character moment from the serious and refined Jiro, maybe even lowering some of the tension between the family. The results of the election come in, and unsurprisingly, Retsuko loses the election. But she learned a lot and motivated people, even helping create one of the biggest voter turnouts they've ever had. You could argue Retsuko still had an impact on the politics, as he forced Jiro's hand of imposing a bill that limits the age of politicians. I didn't think the show would end on Retsuko being a politician. I think it would just stray too far from the norm, and I feel the show thematically has always tried to push accepting your job and role and improving it, but I felt Retsuko would have found a job she liked more by the end of the show. Like, her biggest fantasy ever involving work was in season 1 when she imagined working in her friend's import shop she was opening up, before she found out they were starting an online shop only. The last scene of this show just feels a little empty to me, and a lot of people say it felt rushed, but I don't know how anyone can gauge whether an ending was rushed or not, but I think the majority of comments I've read mention this show being rushed. Like, I'm on the side that's disappointed by the final scene, but I'm not psychic, so I can't really tell if it was rushed, but let's break it down real quick before we end this video. So it ends with Retsuko seeing Haida off to work. We presume he's now gotten an IT job that we saw him studying for this season. Retsuko gets on the subway, and as she's crammed between a lot of people, she talks about how rage is a righteous light that sparks change. And it ends with the sun coming over the horizon of the earth, shining on her. So Yeah, it's a bit disappointing. We see them go by the skunk gamer girl, Shikabane, who's actually outside now, which is nice to show that she's come around and is actually looking into getting an apartment instead of living in the internet cafe. I didn't really go over Haida's partial motivation in this election was to fight for people like Shikabane who have kind of given up on society. So it is really a nice touch to see her here. So that's it, I guess. Oh wait, they got married in the last episode. Did you know Retsuko and Haida got married? Yeah, I even showed it on screen too. You probably didn't see it. Hell, a lot of the people that were watching the episode itself missed it, from the comments I was reading. There's a scene where Haida gets hit by a construction vehicle that clearly implies a hit was put on him in regards to the upcoming election. And Retsuko says they should drop out because it's dangerous, kinda like how Retsuko stopped performing as an idol because it was dangerous in season 3. But Haida says, nah, we can't not live our lives because of the haters. And in their montage setting everything up for the election, they quickly show 2 papers being signed that have subtitles that say Bride Retsuko, Groom Haida. And it's just sad that they've built their relationship and the will they, won't they up for 5 seasons, and we only see a half-second signed paper form to show they got married during this. The show could have ended with them at the altar and faded to black, and I would have been more than happy with that. I don't even particularly care for them as a couple. I think Haida has as much chemistry with Feneko or Inui, that dog girl that likes records, but still, like if you're gonna go all in on Haida and Retsuko, at least show us. I know they have at least an image, if not a puppet rig, of Retsuko in a wedding dress because I've seen it in previous seasons, where she imagines herself getting married. I think you can boil the progress of the season down to one sentence of change, and that's Retsuko and Haida got married. And me just showing this sentence on screen is as much as we see of their marriage in the show. Here, I'll even put the image of Retsuko in a wedding dress on screen. Now I've shown more of their marriage than the show did. I thought the show would end this way, with the 2 fumbling out the door as they go to their respective jobs, but I thought they would have done something together, like run a music shop where they teach singing and guitar. Maybe even Feneko runs the finances or front desk or something. It would have been nice to see a kinda where are they now of Feneko and the other characters, but I think it's safe to say they're still working in the same accounting office. And I guess they don't need to move on to bigger things, since they've shown they don't hate their jobs nearly as much as Retsuko. Plus, if everyone jumped ship and moved to bigger, better things, it may not be the most realistic or appropriate message to be putting out there that, hey, work sucks, do something better, but rather, find a way to embrace and improve your work. It also would have been nice to see a future where Haida and Retsuko have a family or what their kids look like, but I can't hold that as an option that should have happened or anything. Overall, I had a really good time watching Aggretsuko. It has high peaks and low valleys, but even when it misses, it's a fun show to watch and discuss. And that's definitely in part to having really enjoyable, fresh characters throughout the show. I'd love to know what you thought of this season. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to talk further about it or hear your opinions. If you watched the whole video, liking and subscribing is always appreciated if you're chill like that. I gotta go get ready for my office job, so I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching. Bye.